and welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Chris Stashio, and I am joined once again by my good friend and the host of the Projection Booth podcast, Mr. Mike White.
Have you seen my ginseng?
You see, take this bonsai root. Oh my god, it almost killed me. Jesus Christ. And if you don't know what we're referencing, we are rounding out Jackie Chan month with a look at The Legend of the Drunken Master, otherwise known as Drunken Master II in China, but in the States it's called Legend of the Drunken Master. I'm not sure why. But yeah, Legend of the Drunken Master.
It takes perfect timing, expert training, and years of practice to become a master. But for this master,
here you go!
It only takes one drink to become invincible.
Ah, drunken boxing.
You get up! Down the hatch! No more drinking!
But now, when an international gang of terrorists threaten to steal a nation's treasure, to take them on, he's got to tie one on.
Don't worry, it gives him power.
Good stuff! Uh-oh.
For this master, it's last call for the final brawl. Jackie Chan, The Legend of Drunken Master.
Well, probably because the first one came out in, 78, and this one came out in 94, was it? 93, something like that, so...
Let's put it this way. If you look at the cover for the original, and then you look at the cover for this one, Jackie Chan is substantially older.
Right, oh yeah.
A lot older. But I guess he's playing the same character.
Yes.
Okay, because I haven't seen the first one, so...
I just rewatched the first one.
But according to the American title, there is no first one. This is the first one.
Right, this is now The Legend of him.
Right, The Legend of. So the film is directed by Chia Liang Lu, written by Edward Tang, Man Ming Tong, and Kai Chi Yuan, stars Jackie Chan, Ho Sung Pak, and T. Lung. And the film focuses on Jackie Chan playing, again, the character from the original Drunken Master, Wong Fei-hung, as I'm going out the IMDb synopsis here, a young martial artist, though he's clearly in his 30s, late 30s, early 40s, who's caught between disrespecting his father and trying to stop a bunch of whiteys from stealing Chinese artifacts. Cultural appropriation is essentially the subtitle of this movie. It should be called Legend of the Drunken Master, He Who Stops Cultural Appropriation. So I'm curious, Mike, because this was kind of a late addition to this month's list. Why did you pick Legend of the Drunken Master, and what do you think of it watching it again?
Well, I probably should have picked this one right off the bat, because as I was rewatching this yesterday, I was like, this is everything that we've been talking about when it has come to all of these Jackie Chan films. This is all of those things that we pointed out were kind of weaknesses in the earlier films aren't weaknesses here. And all of the things like, oh, well, there's usually one big opening scene, one big closing scene, and not a whole lot in between. No, with this film, it is action, 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 and there's very little time to breathe in between all of those things. So I think this, I don't want to say it fixes those earlier problems, but it definitely addresses those and gets us going throughout this entire thing. The comedy is still there. Some of those themes, like you talked about cultural appropriation, like, that's kind of there in things like Operation Condor / Armor of God. But with this one, it is a major theme, and it just really hits all of the notes that we've been talking about through all of these films, and it does it in such a great way.
And also like to point out, it doesn't have a confusing story.
No.
I'm gonna say this much about this movie. This is the best movie we've watched this month, without a doubt. No questions asked in my mind. It has everything that I wanted from a Jackie Chan movie. It has an engaging plot. It has really memorable villains. It has a lot of great action, and it's a little bit more subdued than, say, Police Story, which is more about the giant set pieces. This is more about the actual martial arts being practiced by Jackie and the rest of the cast, which as much as I do like Police Story, I mean, we talked about that, how great it is, how great that opening set piece is. Police Story is also kind of a little one note compared to something like this. This is fun throughout. It's over the top, but not in a bad way. It's over the top in the right amount. It has a good amount of physical comedy and just comedy. And I mean, I don't think I would be remiss to say that this might be one of my favorite action movies I've ever seen. I mean, it's just so strong throughout that, I mean, thinking back on it, I can't really nitpick very much with this film.
No. It's interesting, too, because I think about this film almost in terms of the negatives as far as what it doesn't have. It doesn't have a training montage. Like, that is so much of the first movie is the training montage. It doesn't have a love interest, and I think that's where a lot of those confusing subplots always come in, which is Jackie's in love with this girl, something happens to make her think that he doesn't love her or whatever, and then, hilarity ensues. None of that is there, which is really kind of nice. And as far as the romance goes, it's between T. Lung and Anita Mui. The only real confusion that is going on in this is the whole idea of these two switch boxes, which is not very confusing at all because we understand as the audience everything that is going on in here, and Jackie is the one who is kind of, he's the butt of the joke as far as this stuff goes, and it causes a lot of consequences. I mean, that is what starts the movie, and that's what so much of this hinges on.
Well, and like you said, I mean, the lack of the romantic interest in this movie is to the film's benefit. It really keeps that away. Like you said, I mean, the problem I had with Dragons Forever, the problem I had with Police Story, and the problem I didn't have with Armor of God, because Armor of God actually did a really good job of kind of keeping the romantic interest within the kind of framework of the plot itself, as opposed to some sort of like weird subplot. It was, the character was part of the action. The character of, what was her name? I was say Missy, but that wasn't it.
It might have been May. I'm not sure.
Yeah, her character is like, no, that was from Police Story.
That's Police Story, yeah.
The character of the white woman that Jackie Chan loves in Armor of God that he's going after, she's part of the plot, so it doesn't feel like a tacked-on thing until he lands on the hot air balloon at the end of the movie. But in this movie, there's none of that. It's between T. Lung and Anita Mui, and that, I think, is almost better than those two characters are better than almost every other character I've seen in any of the other Jackie Chan movies. Like
right.
the supporting characters.
Well, even those side characters like Tsang, his friend, who's played by Felix Wong, I really like him. I really like Master Fu Wenqi, who's played by Lau Kar-lang. He is fantastic as well. The villain, I thought it was interesting that we don't really have Jackie taking out the white guys too much at the end of the movie, that it ends up being this guy named John. And I kept trying to figure out if he was supposed to be playing like a Japanese guy because the Japanese are coming in and stealing things from China, because the Japanese a lot of times are portrayed as villains. Right. But I think it's even worse because I think he is a fellow Chinese who's doing this to his own people and stealing all of these things.
I don't want to say it's like Samuel L. Jackson, Django Unchained, because I hate Quentin Tarantino, but that would be the one comparison I would make, is like he who subjugates his own race because he knows that to do that is better than being the one subjugated. So, in kind of in accord with the subjugators as opposed to being the subjugated. But holy shit, Ken Lo in this movie is intimidating. That scene at the end where his leg is straight up in the air, and he's like, drunken boxing, eh? Boy, god damn, I wouldn't want to fight him. And he takes Jackie to town.
Well, the sound effects where it sounds like his like they recently did that thing with like honors trailers where they showed Henry Cavill in the last Mission Impossible movie where he kind of like cocks his arms as he's walking towards Tom Cruise to punch him in the bathroom. And that sound effect is there times 1,000 when it comes to him cocking his leg and like just like he's almost like Chun-Li or something in Street Fighter 2, where he's just gonna like get ready for the 1,000 kicks of Jackie.
And oh my god, the end of this movie is just, oh fuck me, it's insane. And so here's the thing. I know I've seen this movie before. I want to say I saw it probably when I was like 12 or 13. It's been a long time. I mean, that's 15 years ago. I remember parts of this movie. I don't remember the entire movie, but I know I've seen it. And goddamn, I mean, this I wasn't kidding when I say that this might be one of my favorite, like, new favorite action movies. Because, like, I would put this right up against with, like, you know, and I'm not a huge fan of Sylvester Stallone. Sorry if anyone else is. But like Schwarzenegger movies or Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, like, this movie is so much fun, and it does everything right, and it also, you know, we've talked about this in the last 3 podcasts where, you know, oh, it's just Jackie playing Jackie. In this movie, that's not the case.
Right.
Like, you know, Fei-hung, that's his character. He's an actual defined character. And within, like, the first 10 minutes of the movie, you can already see who his character is. And again, I had never seen the original film. To be fair, I'm not sure, in your approximation, would it be necessary to watch the original to appreciate this movie? I don't think so.
No, it's definitely not.
You know, that movie, I mean, again, I haven't seen it, but I'm assuming it's not as fun or nearly as high quality as this movie is.
There's some fun parts to it, but I mean, it's a very different storyline, and it is kind of more in line with 70s action films, like this whole thing of, like, you know, whose kung fu is better, and he has to learn this new school. But it's kind of similar insofar as he's a disappointment to his father. He keeps screwing up, those kind of things. But that's about it, you know. And then he sends Jackie off to learn from this guy named, I think it's Drunken So, and then he has to learn drunken boxing, and there's a killer out there, and somehow he gets involved with this guy and gets humiliated in a battle. Then he has to come back and beat this guy up at the end of the film, and then it ends really super abruptly. That's about it. I think I just told you the entire plot of Drunken Master 1.
Well, and this movie is not that no. kind of one note. It sounds a little one note. Very similarly to the other Jackie Chan movies that we've seen. They're a little one note.
It's not a bad film by any means, and they do some clever things in there. There's some very funny things. You know, it's along the lines of like Half a Loaf of Kung Fu or Young Master, those kind of films. It's a little bit more evolved than some of those movies. You can see, you know, where Jackie is headed, but I mean, it's not a necessary watch compared to this movie.
I like the idea of what this movie is and what it kind of goes out of its way to do, which is like really giving Jackie Chan a like toned down version of everything that we'd be used to at this point, right? I mean, like at this point, 94, this film didn't come out in the States proper, quotations, until 2000. And, you know, at that point, people were expecting, you know, Police Story or Armor of God with these huge set pieces and these crazy, like, over-the-top action scenes. And this movie has that, but it's really, like, laser focused on allowing Jackie Chan to really, like, show off his actual martial arts abilities. And I really appreciate that about this movie.
So much of this film takes place in the one town, the one factory, you know, the one house. There's not, you know, the one inn. I mean, there are set pieces and stuff other than the train at the beginning and seeing Jackie move from one place to another. Almost this entire thing just takes place in his village.
Right. And again, I really appreciate that because the last couple movies we've seen, it's been all over the place. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, you know, but this movie benefits from being a little bit more toned down, if that makes sense.
Well, it also benefits insofar as this is about T. Lung and his school and his face and all of these things that are going on around him. And so having Jackie as this kind of fuck-up son and having Anita Mui as this... I thought she was lying about her pregnancy. I was really surprised at the end of the film when she doesn't join them. I was like, really? That's the real thing? Because she's super manipulative in a good way. I mean, but yeah, this whole thing is about T. Lung and his standing in the village, and having this fuck-up son is a really big source of concern and a bone of contention with the family and all of this. So yeah, it is a much smaller thing. Even though there is international global intrigue happening, it's not a globe-trotting story like we just saw in Armor of God, where he is going around all over the place, very, you know, 007/Indiana Jones.
And again, I mean, as much as I like that, this movie stands out from those movies because it isn't that. Because it isn't trying to do something else. I mean, I'm sure this movie does take a lot of influence from a lot of other kung fu films, but it does its own thing with the addition of Jackie Chan with the drunken boxing. And I swear to God, his face at the end of the movie looked like he was going to explode.
There are so many great pieces in here. I mean, the fight under the train at the beginning, you're
Holy
fighting in this
shit.
enclosed space with these long poles and just, oh my God, just the choreography of all of these fights. And then when the fight moves to, this guy's hut or whatever, when he's, after the initial robbery, all of those moves inside of there. I mean, these fights are so well choreographed. The fight with the Axe Gang is one of my favorite things that I've ever seen.
With the kendo stick that's like frayed at the end, or I guess a piece of bamboo.
Yeah.
And he's just like smacking the shit out of these guys, causing them to bleed because of the frayed ends of the bamboo. It's everything I've wanted this month, dialed up to 11, but also dialed down to like a 5. And that's what's awesome is there's no snowmobiles or fucking helicopters or parachuting to hot air balloons or exploding cars. It's a period piece at the end of the day, and one that is very successful in giving us memorable characters and a lot of really high quality kung fu. And when I say really high quality, I mean every fight scene is memorable. Even something as kind of, I mean, the fight under the train's not very long, but Jesus Christ.
Right?
It is insane.
One of my favorite moments from this entire film, I mean, yeah, it's not, cars crashing and explosions and, tearing up a village or anything like that. It's when he is beating up those guys and he's getting drunk. His mom's throwing him bottles, those things. When he's laying on the one guy and the guy rolls away, but he's still in that laying position, just holding his body up like that. That's one of my favorite things in the whole world, is just to see that physicality that Jackie can bring to these things. And that, we've got this perfect moment of comedy and action happening with this. I mean, it's not like he's fighting the big bad guy and there's moments of comedy, because later on when he is fighting the big bad guy, there's a little bit of comedy, but for the most part, it is very super serious. I mean, him going across those hot coals, nothing really funny about that. But him with those guys where he's getting drunk, now that's the moment for the comedy, and that's where it is super funny. Him with those benches, those kind of things, all of that works pitch perfectly.
Well, and that's the thing that, like you said, there is a fair amount of comedy. I mean, the fact that Jackie is getting like piss wasted.
Oh yeah.
To fight, and that's the kind of, like you were mentioning earlier, the bone of contention between him and his father is that his father doesn't want him to do drunken boxing because the practitioners of drunken boxing often just become drunkards, and because you have to drink to do drunken boxing effectively, quote unquote. And his father says in one of the scenes, the practitioners of drunken boxing, they end up just becoming drunkards and they do nothing with their lives. And that's what he's trying to prevent his son from doing. But at the same time, when you watch Jackie get drunk and start doing the actual drunken boxing, it is so insane. Like, it's so over the top, but again, it's hard hitting. And like you said at the end of the film, I mean, it's so serious because you've got, these characters that are trying to burn Jackie alive.
Oh, God.
And he's fighting them. And look, very rarely do I feel nervous watching a movie, but watching that scene in the foundry made me nervous because that's like very clearly not, it's a safe set, but there's a lot of dangerous shit going on, like, at all times. I mean, if you watch the blooper reel at the end of the film, Jackie actually walked over those hot coals. Those aren't fake hot coals.
Right.
And that to me is, I mean, look, it's not a very bombastic scene, but I mean, he's crawling backwards across like 1,000-degree coals. Jesus Christ. That's insane. Only Jackie Chan, I guess.
Right. I was very fortunate because I think I saw this around 94 when it was first released, and I saw it at in Ann Arbor at one of the nice theaters up there where they would show foreign films. And so I saw the version before, Dimension and Miramax got their hands on it. So there's a little bit extra. There's like more of him when he's drinking that industrial strength alcohol, that it's affecting him even more negatively than we see in the movie, because basically if you drink that shit, you'll go blind. So there's a lot of him struggling to see. It's like kind of, is it worth it for him to drink this industrial strength alcohol for him to have, the drunken boxing powers, or will he go blind and die because of it? So those moments where he stops and is like gurgling and all those things, they went on for a little bit more in that version. And then we also, and I know that you're sad about this, but we also missed out on that ending theme that got thrown onto the Dimensions release. I think it was actually Jackie, of course, singing his own outro theme for that.
I am sad that I missed that because the outro theme on the version that I watched is fucking atrocious. It is because obviously, like you said, this film came out in 94 and you could see it in the States at certain theaters that showed foreign films, but it didn't get a Dimension release until 2000. And so the outro theme for the movie is generic early 2000s alt-rock garbage. It is, oh my God. It's like the end song from Super Troopers without the lyrics. And the end song from Super Troopers works because that film came out in 2001.
Right.
And it's like a comedy film about stoner highway patrols men, but this movie doesn't need that kind of theme at all. It just doesn't work. And watching it over the blooper reel, I was just like, oh man, fucking really? Come on. Anything but this. And I know I was, going on and on about Jackie Chan's really expert singing, but I would have rather had that because at least it's like, okay, Jackie Chan singing the own outro for his movie. We've seen that now 2 times, and God knows how many times he did it for all the movies he was in.
Right.
But yeah, Miramax just... I guess I gotta give him credit for getting Jackie Chan to dub his own voice.
Yeah.
But not much else credit can be given to Miramax because the version I watched, the dimensions of it, no pun intended, are off. It looks bad in spots. And if, you're talking about things being cut out, stuff like that would have been important. And also it feels like, and I don't know, because I don't know the version that you watched versus the version that I watched, which is kind of a problem. We're doing a podcast about a movie like this that has multiple versions, especially due to an American release. The ending felt so bizarre.
Yeah.
It felt very truncated. It's like, oh, and he's off doing something else we're covering. Okay, the end. What?
Right. And I don't know if I have this one on DVD or VCD or any of those other formats. I think I used to own this on VHS, but when I was watching this for the podcast, I think I watched the same one as you, which was the Netflix version.
Yeah, and the ending is so truncated.
Yeah.
And just, it's really bad. That's the only problem I have with this movie. And I would be curious to know if that's the way the film originally ended. Kind of just like, boom, cut, the end.
I don't remember there being more after it. But yeah, it's been a long time. It's been, 14 years? No, 24 years since I've seen that. Years. Jesus Christ.
But it's not great. And the ending, I think, is the one issue I have with the movie. It's because you want to know how kind of his story ends, and his story ends, he's still recovering. Okay.
Right.
He's not even part of the conclusion of the film.
Right. And unfortunately, there is Drunken Master 3, but it has nothing to do with with Drunken Master 2.
And let me guess, it probably doesn't even have Jackie Chan in it.
No. It is directed by Lau Kar-leung, who did the action direction in that one. And then, didn't I just say he played, was he Felix in this one? Yeah, he was, he was the master, Master Fu Wen-chi in this one. So he picked up the action directing the whole directing for the third one. But yeah, there's no Jackie. I want to say it was Andy Lau did it was Andy Lau was the main character in this one. And he's not Wong Fei-hung, it's Willie Chi as Wong Fei-hung.
I'm assuming that the character that Jackie Chan is playing was a real person, right?
Yeah. There are certain movies like that where people play allegedly, or people based on real people. Like Ip Man is based on a real person.
Right.
The guy who taught Bruce Lee Kung Fu. Who is it? The Once Upon a Time in China character. I'm not even sure. He might be the same guy that Jackie's playing, but I don't think so.
So, speaking of Ip Man, let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about who could have been, or who was offered a role in this movie, and who didn't take it.
Have a hunger for horror? A yen for yelp yarns? Then Give your blood-curdled bones a boon and tune in to Chronicles from the Crypt. Join sordid slime slingers Casualty Chris and Father Malone as they take on HBO's groundbreaking television series Tales from the Crypt. Here's what the rotting and rancid rabble are saying about Chronicles from the Crypt. Tune in to Chronicles from the Crypt. You have nothing to lose except your life.
Who is Carl Kolchak?
He's a reporter.
Now that is news, Vincenzo. News! And we are a newspaper. We are supposed to print news, not suppress it.
With the INS.
What's an INS?
Independent News Service, sir. Founded in 1904 by Enrico Paluzzi.
Who seems to have a nose for the strange and unusual.
Well, last year in Las Vegas, I uncovered a series of murders that turned out to have been committed by a vampire.
And what is the Kolchak Tapes?
It's a podcast.
All about Carl Kolchak.
What's a Kolchak?
The Night Stalker.
And where can you get it?
On iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at www.kolchaktapes.com.
As foolish a game as any that Gory the Ghoul could make up.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
Week after week, I'm mesmerized by the focus given great films and questionable films alike. But every episode is a learning and entertaining experience.
This is hands down the best movie podcast. They cover so many different genres across so many years, from obscure movies to blockbusters.
If there's only one podcast about movies and cinema that you listen to, make it this one.
The Projection Booth Podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
In 1985, a curious phenomenon occurred. The Twilight Zone returned to television, featuring all new tales of mystery and imagination from the minds of Ray Bradbury, Harlan Ellison, George R.R. Martin, and Stephen King. Dreams for Sale, the Twilight Zone 85 podcast looks back at that land of shadow and substance and re-examines the groundbreaking successor to Rod Serling's legacy. Featuring new interviews with the show's creators and cast, Dreams for Sale can be found on iTunes and at twilightzone85.com. Dreams for Sale. We'll be waiting for you in the Twilight Zone.
All right, we are back, and as I mentioned before the break, we're talking some more about Legend of the Drunken Master. So there was a role in the movie that was offered to one Donnie Yen.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't take it. He was offered the role of John, the main villain of the film.
Okay.
Can you imagine if Donnie Yen had been in this movie?
Donnie Yen is so great.
Right? I mean, God damn it. I mean, as much as I love Ken Lo in this movie, which I really do, he's a great villain. He's really imposing. Donnie Yen versus Jackie Chan at the end of the movie would have been top 2 best things you'll ever see in film.
So especially I was
like
right.
That crazy fight in the foundry with the two of them. I can't even imagine. My brain cannot process if that had been something that we could have actually seen.
So I was right. Jet Li does play Wong Fei-hung in Once Upon a Time in China. So yeah, that's the character I'm thinking of, who's been in a bunch of different movies. So I'm kind of surprised that Jackie's playing a character with the same name.
Well, and, I'm pretty sure that Wong Fei-hung didn't actually fight people in a foundry. I would
probably not
wager a guess. But, it makes for a fun story. And I think I think that this movie, it is a lot of fun because the story is so straightforward.
Well, I like that when he comes into that foundry, that it's pretty much him, a man alone. Like his other guys come in, but the whole thing of him not allowing his other guys to kill anybody, and him wearing the more traditional Chinese clothes in order to save the historical artifacts of China. I thought was a really
Ken
nice
Lo in
too.
A suit.
Yeah, I thought that was a really nice touch to having those two guys, butting heads.
Well, and I like Ken Lo as John a lot, but I also like how kind of weaselly Ho Sung Pak looks as Henry.
Oh yeah,
because like Henry is more there throughout the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And, John kind of shows up when he kicks Jackie's ass when he's drunk, and then you don't see him until the end of the movie again, at least not in the capacity of, like, beating people up.
Well, that moment when he finds Jackie drunk in the cafe and kicks the shit out of him and hangs him from the public square, I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. And again, it gives you a reason to really despise these villains. Because again, that was the other thing that we've kind of run into with these Jackie Chan movies is the villains, they're dastardly, but I mean, they're not much. They're corrupt businessmen.
Well, and Jackie almost always wins. He might get tripped up by like the legal system or something, but he almost always wins.
And only fights them at the end.
Right.
Which is the other thing. There's like multiple fights with the villains of the movie throughout the film, which I really liked.
Well, even Master Fu Wenchi, he beats up Jackie, and then to see him die in the film, it's like, oh my God, it's such a blow when he gets that axe in the back, and then he gets motherfucking shot a couple times. It's like, that's not supposed to happen.
The thing I wish, and I don't know why he wasn't in the movie more, but I'm kind of surprised Andy Lau wasn't in the movie more, right?
Yeah.
They kind of built him up as this character of importance at the beginning of the film, and then he doesn't do anything. He's not in the rest of the film. And I mean, obviously he would, if you've seen The Departed, then you've essentially seen the American version of the film that Andy Lau was in, Infernal Affairs, which is, by the way, a much better film than The Departed. But he's in that movie as one of the main characters. And when I saw him in this, I was like, shit, the guy from Infernal Affairs, awesome. And then he's in like the first couple scenes and then that's it. I was like, okay. I honestly thought he was going to factor into the movie somehow.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of nice, though, that so many of these actors are bigger actors and they have so much history. I mean, T. Lung has been in so many things. I mean, he was acting in Chopsaki films before Jackie was and has this rich history to him. And it was interesting, like, his role in A Better Tomorrow, it was kind of like a comeback role for him. Like, people were like, oh, you're putting this older actor into this film, even though that was, 8 years before this one was, but that brought his career back and made him viable again. And then Anita Mui, who sadly passed in 2003, she was fantastic in everything that she was in. If you ever get a chance, check out the movie Rouge. It was fantastic. Also known as Rouge 1. Everyone dies in it. And then she was just so incredible in The Heroic Trio. That is one of my favorite films of all time.
And then she was also in Rumble in the Bronx with Jackie, wasn't she?
Exactly. And it was interesting. I didn't realize that she had passed until I was looking up. I was watching Kung Fu Hustle, and Stephen Chow uses an actress who bears a passing resemblance to Anita Mui for a lot of his comic stuff. Like, she plays the landlady in that film, and she is like, it's like a living cartoon. And I was like, oh, well, that's Anita Mui. And then I looked her up, and I was like, first off, that's not Anita Mui, and second off, Anita Mui died in 2003, so I was just devastated, because after 97, I didn't see a lot of Hong Kong films, so I thought that all of my favorite actors were still out there, viable, making movies, and then when you find that out, it's like, oh, man.
Yeah, because she is great in this movie.
Oh, her comic timing is so wonderful, and her kung fu timing is wonderful.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed we didn't get to see her fight more. That's kind of the other thing about this movie it like teases some of the characters fighting a little bit more, and I would have liked to have seen her kind of get a little bit in on the action a little bit more, because, like you said, she's great. I mean, absolutely fantastic. Just a complete and utter, like, if I'm talking about the best parts of this movie, she's one of the best parts of the movie, without a doubt.
Her with her mahjong, her, when she reveals her pregnancy, when she starts to throw herself on the ground and T. Lung catches her those times. I mean, just the acrobatics involved in that was so great.
And the fact that she has, like, Jackie's well-being in mind and knows that, like, he is a very, like, well-known practitioner of drunken boxing. And it's like, it's not really easy to keep that down.
Right.
And she's like egging him on, not egging him on, but enabling him to really, throwing him the bottles during that fight, and really, like, wanting him to use his, abilities to help out their family business.
And when she goes up against Fu Wenchi again, and then that ends up being like a family battle where the three of them are going against the one guy, where T. Lung jumps into that battle too. And I love that too, when Jackie's pretending that he's hurt, and then he just, like, turns to her and he's like, oh no, I just wanted Ted to help out.
Well, and, T. Lung also does, he has, I think, 2 fights in the film? 2. And he's great also. I mean, everything about this movie is just great. I mean, it's just, everything about this movie is exactly what I wanted from Jackie Chan movies this month.
Right.
And I think it delivers in every facet of the film delivers.
Well, I'm glad that you got to see this one.
Yeah, me too. Mike, what would you give this film out of 5?
I would give this 5 out of 5.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. 5 out of 5. Except for the kind of weird ending, which, I mean, again, I would be curious to see if that's the way the film ends in the non-Dimension / Miramax version. I really like this movie, and I think it's a lot of fun, and I definitely think it's the best Jackie Chan movie I've seen. It's a little bit more toned down than everything else we've watched, but I don't think that's a bad thing. No, it doesn't have a downhill shantytown car chase, but it doesn't need it, and that's what makes this movie fun. And again, I feel like this is, I don't want to say this is the last great Jackie Chan movie, but looking at a lot of his stuff after this, it's not great. I mean, after this, we get Rush Hour and Shanghai Noon and all that, and it's at least for American audiences, if that makes sense.
I would completely agree with that.
Yeah. It's Jackie Chan now, I mean, we've had this conversation, Jackie Chan now doesn't even do his own stunts.
I mean,
for good reason.
It's no the tuxedo, but hey, what is?
Or the medallion. Oh, man. But yeah, I mean, past 94, I mean, we've already had this conversation, but you mentioned how much you like Jackie in the 80s, and I mean, this is, mid 90s, but I think that this is pre-Rumble in the Bronx by a year. And once Rumble in the Bronx came out is kind of when Jackie became a name stateside, or at least a more mainstream name.
Right.
So where can people find you, Mike, when you're shit-talking other movie writers?
You can find me over at projectionboothpodcast.com, where every week apparently I attack unknowing film critics and just bash on them. You
can follow me on Twitter at CultureStash. Head on over to culturecast.com, where you can find out more about today's episode and 290 something other episodes of the Culture Cast if you want to check those out. You'll find links over to iTunes, where you can rate and review the show, and to Patreon if you want to kick us a couple dollars. Big thanks as always to Eric for the intro outro music, and to Mike for not only programming this past month but also joining me on every single podcast this month.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for letting me expose you to some more Jackie Chan.
Maybe next time you'll expose yourself to me.
I am not Devin Faraci.